All right. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We truly appreciate it. It is now officially 1 p.m., so we're going to get started in order to honor your time. So again, thanks for joining us. Today, what we're going to do is that we're going to have a chat about co-op. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm a career advisor at the Center for Career Action at the University of Waterloo. My job is a large part of my job involves speaking with students looking for their first co-op work term. So I'll be able to speak a little bit about how you can help prepare yourself for the first co-op work term. And then you will also get to meet Harry and Edward, who are our senior co-op students, so that you get to hear a little bit about their journey and their tips and tricks for getting through that past that first co-op work term. So before we get started here, it is very, very important to acknowledge the fact that we live and work in the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. The University of Waterloo, and where I live as well, in Waterloo, is situated on the Haldimand Tract, the land promised to the Six Nations that includes 10 kilometers on each side of the Grand River. It's really important to start to acknowledge and think about these things as we begin to parse together what we can do to right the wrongs that traditionally we have made, and to try to live up to truth and reconciliation. And one of those ways is by acknowledging the fact that this land was promised to the peoples that have been living here for thousands of years and have been stewards of this land. So this is the very, very first step in truth and reconciliation. All right, so here's how today's gonna go down. We're gonna quickly do a recap of the pre-work that hopefully you've done. And then what you're all excited to do is to meet the upper year engineering students and see their first resume to get a feel for what it was like when they went through the same process that you're about to go through starting in the fall or in the winter. And then we will have a question and answer period to help you prepare for your first co-op work term. So please submit questions using the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. And questions will be answered by current co-op students via typed responses, so look out for that. And we'll also answer as many as we can aloud during the moderated part of the event, so in those last 30 minutes there. So before we get started, in case you're not quite sure what I'm talking about when I talk about pre-work for today's session, this is all on Learn, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at this. It's actually a video that I recorded to get you started on thinking about what you might want to do for co-op or before your recruiting term starts, and getting you thinking about preparing that first resume. And so the pre-work that we have for you is just for you to start thinking about all of the ways that you can provide evidence that you actually have the skills that employers are looking for. And the fact is that you do have those skills and you do have that evidence. And it's just a matter of plugging away at this document. This is going to help you so much when it comes to writing your first resume. So we really, really encourage you to check out that video and, of course, do a little bit of the work if you haven't already. If you have, thank you very much. That's awesome. All right, so before we begin, we just have to put this out there. We acknowledge and appreciate that you will definitely have some questions regarding the University of Waterloo's COVID-19 response. So as you know, the campus has moved to online instruction, of course, in order to limit the exposure to our students and faculty for the fall 2020 term. And if you have any more questions, the best place to go for the most up-to-date information is uwaterloo.ca/coronavirus. And there's a big banner on the homepage. You can't miss it, but check it out in case you have any questions. There's extensive FAQs in there. It really is a good resource. Okay, and just so you get a feel for what today will look like, we'll have about 30 minutes of presentation and then 30 minutes at the end for question and answers. So please use the question and answer box, not the chat, to ask your question. So you see we have it circled there. Waterloo staff are on the webinar and absolutely ready to respond. And the follow-up address will be provided at the end of the presentation in case you have any questions that you have that were not answered during this time. In case you have technical difficulties, Know that this presentation is being recorded, so it will be available within a week of, within the week on the website where you registered for this webinar. And of course, any follow-up questions can be forwarded through the resources we have for you at the end. All right, but enough about all of this. We're getting to that portion of this presentation that you're probably most excited about, which is where you get to meet our senior students. So I will turn this over to Harry, who will introduce himself to you and let you in on his first year resume. Welcome, Harry. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, so I'm Harry. I'm in mechanical engineering, and I'm going into my 2B term this fall. So I'm in 4 streams. So I've done 3 work terms. The third one is the one I'm doing right now. Actually, my first job, it took me a while to get it. So if I remember correctly, I got my job and started it on the last day possible for me to get a credit. And the main reason for that, that I got the job, was that I had SolidWorks and 3D printing experience. And time management was also a key part, because a lot of my work included me doing independent work, and I'd have lots of tasks that I'd have to do on time, and so time management was really useful. And like I said, and then I went back to my old company for my second term as well, and the main reason that they rehired me was my attention to detail. As a quality engineer, being detail oriented is very important, because you want to be able to make sure that parts are meeting specifications. And so that was really important. And my current job is at the University of Waterloo. And communication is a really big part, because I'm talking to first year students as a peer mentor and doing things like that. And so communication was the most important transferable skill that was required for this job.
And Harry, thank you for that. Before we keep going here, I have a quick question for you. So if you could put yourself in your headspace where you were looking for that first co-op work term, what kind of advice would you provide to a younger Harry?
I'd say just because you haven't got a job and other people are getting a job, don't let that get to your head. You have tons of time. You have all the way until the end of January to get a job. If you're 4th stream, you have until January to get a job. And just make sure to apply daily. Don't leave things to the last minute. The more you apply, the more chance you're going to get a job.
Thank you. And since that first work term, how has your co-op work search evolved since then? Have you been able to maybe find different daily rituals that have worked for you?
Yeah, so it's a little bit better now. I tried to during the study term, I try to make sure to leave 30 minutes or an hour every day, go onto Waterloo Works and get a couple jobs and apply to those. And so I'm applying to more jobs, and I think that might have helped get me a job later on. Yeah, so this is my so this is my first year resume. As you can see, I have 5 sections. The first section is the summary of qualifications. So this is where I just summarized all my skills. In this specific one, I put my SolidWorks 3D printing skills first, because this is the one that I used to apply for my first co-op job. And they really wanted those skills, so I put at the beginning so that they can see it right away. And the next section was project section. So these 2 actually helped me get the job as well, just because they wanted me to design fixtures and measure parts. And so the fact that these projects directly correlated with that was a big help. And these are just projects that I did during 1A. So it's not something I had before coming into university. It's something that I was able to gain after through 1A. And the other 2 sections are just relevant experience and additional experience, which is just volunteer work and club work. So that's just things that I did through high school. Every high schooler has done volunteer work. We've all been part of clubs, and so I didn't have any other jobs, so I put that, and any experience before your first job is good experience, and as long as you can use that and tie in transferable skills, uh, it's useful to getting your first job. And looking back, um, this resume is kind of bland, and I'd probably make it a little bit more like make it more less bland and like highlight things. Like now, my resume now is more colorful. It highlights some of the more important information. And I've noticed that like interviewers don't necessarily like look through in detail the whole resume. They like skim through, and so like making sure you highlight your key points is really useful and like helpful.
So Harry, thank you very much for walking us through your resume. You've told us some of the things that you would maybe change if you were to go through this again. What are the things that you think you did really well?
Just like the fact that I put like the projects, right? So this specific one is like, this resume is specific to the job, the Dynaplast job that I applied to. So I put like the designing a phone stand and like the SolidWorks experience that I had like at the top of the resume, just so that they can see it. That's because that's what they wanted to look for. So it didn't make sense for me to put that I made a Java game, because that wasn't related to the job. And so I customized some of my resumes just so they were more relevant to the job that I was applying for. And I think that was a good thing, because that's eventually what got me that job.
Thank you very much. I truly appreciate that. And lastly, what is your top tip for students writing their first resume?
Try to keep it short and concise. Like try to limit to one page, and make sure you're explaining things of like why you did this and how you did it and what you achieved with that. So like, yeah, just explain why, like how you would be a good thing. Like I did this because of this, and this is what it caused me to, like it improved the efficiency of something. And like put the main points of like, put your main important points that relate to the job you're applying to at the top of your summary of qualifications.
I agree. Thank you. That puts the most relevant information easily accessible to the employers. Great. Thank you very much, Harry. Truly appreciate you walking us through this, and we will see you again in the Q&A. All right. So moving forward here, I would like everybody to please meet Edward.
Hi, I'm Edward. And so what you see on screen is kind of the breakdown of my first 4 work terms. I'm currently in 3A, so I was in H stream in my first year, and I've had 4 co-ops since then. Right now, I'm currently working for the university as a senior online learning assistant.
Thank you, Edward. And now if you can walk us through each of your co-op work terms, especially starting with the first one. We're curious to see how your first recruiting term went.
Sure. So my first co-op job was actually also at the university. So I got a job working in Waterloo, which was the makerspace that's available on campus. So I was hired as one of 2 co-op students there, and I was in charge of maintaining 3D printers, laser cutter, and also helping train students on using the equipment. And I also had a side project to work on while I was there, involving some robotics. So yeah, the most important thing I learned from that job was problem solving and research. So a lot of the job was independent and learning how to solve problems on my own. So if something went wrong with, for example, a 3D printer, I had to go figure out what was wrong, troubleshoot it, try things out. And I learned a lot about research and how to take concepts from like research papers and make them happen in real life. So I was doing a bit of research into soft robotics, and I looked up some procedures, and using that and turning into something usable for work was something I learned a lot about during that co-op.
Great, thank you. And how about the rest of your co-op work terms? If you can tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah. So building off of that first co-op where I was involved with 3D printing, I got a job with Delta Elevator, which is a company in Kitchener, which is next to Waterloo, and I was in charge of additive manufacturing design. So what I did was they were working on some prototypes for a new project, and I was in charge of designing those parts and creating those using the 3D printer that they had. In addition to that, I was also in charge of making some small jigs and fixtures. So if down in the shop people needed this specific angle or specific tool for manufacturing, they would give me an idea of this is kind of what they needed, and I would go design in Autodesk Inventor, create it with 3D printer, and then bring it back to them, and they'll give their feedback, and it will improve the product. So making those kind of on-demand tools. I learned a lot about communication there. So obviously when I was trying to get feedback about what they needed and how I could accomplish that, so I learned how to talk to a lot of different people, including my supervisor and also people down in the shop about what exactly they needed. My third co-op was a bit of a tangent from that as well. So kind of going back to university, I was working as a engineering teaching assistant. So one of the WEAF TAs, specifically for Gen 121, which is the programming course that the Mechatronics students take in 1A. And in that co-op, I learned a lot about teamwork and collaboration because I was working with a team of 2 other TAs specifically for my course, but generally working that group of about 60 WEAF TAs and distributing all our work evenly throughout the 4 months, figuring out if someone had too many tasks to do, offloading that off to someone else so that everyone had something to do and that stuff was getting done quickly for the students. And then coming down finally to what I'm doing right now, I'm helping moving courses online. So I'm helping prepare resources on things on how do you use Learn effectively for your online courses, or how do you make videos and stuff. So from this, I'm learning a lot about working remotely using things like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and how to communicate with coworkers kind of in this remote environment these days, which will be useful going forwards.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Harry. What advice would you give to yourself if you could go back in time and talk to yourself as you're looking for your first co-op work term?
Something I would tell to myself is focus on the skills that employers are looking for. Just because you have skills that you think are interesting or useful might not be what they're looking for. So don't put it on your resume or don't emphasize it. Instead, emphasize the things that they are actually looking for. So instead of kind of going on about things like, I know how to use Microsoft Excel really well, when they're actually looking for someone who can do CAD really well, try and emphasize the skills that they're looking for and tailoring the resume whenever possible for that.
Great, thank you. And in the work search in general, in your experience, how important has transferable skills been?
It's been pretty important. A lot of times when in interviews, they ask questions about how you would handle a specific situation, and those are when the transferable skills are really important, being able to demonstrate that I can do the problem solving necessary, or I can work through this issue by communicating properly with my supervisors and bringing up the issue properly and getting the right help. That's something that employers are often looking for, and kind of getting a sense of, do you know what to do in this situation?
Great, thank you very much, Edward. I tend to agree. Yes, we see a lot of those kinds of questions in interviews. All righty, fantastic. So without further ado, please walk us through your first resume.
Right. So this is my first resume from when I was applying for jobs in 1B. So generally kind of went with a 2-column style, where on the left I had a bunch of information kind of relate to skills. On the middle, more towards the right side, I kind of had the listing of all the experiences I had. So the majority of my experiences are actually from high school. I had some experience with design team, but the majority of it was from things I did in high school and working with some clubs and also some organizations. If I were to go back and look at this again, I definitely would cut out some of the stuff like French or CPR, things that they weren't really looking for in the jobs I was applying for. So going back to making sure it's relevant.
And what are the things that you think you did well on this first resume?
Something I like about this resume is kind of the colors. So it's pretty easy to find information that you're looking for just at a glance. So if you're looking for kind of design projects, it's easy to see it's in blue, it stands out. So I like the organization in that regard. That's easy to find information.
Thank you. I agree. And what kind of advice would you give students looking to make their first resume for their first work term?
First resume for your first work term, definitely focus on that content. Like Harry said, focus on what you did, how you did, but most importantly, why and what impact it had on your employer. So showing off in your resume kind of what you did and why it was important for you to do it and how it benefited the people you're working for, it goes a long way to making it seem relevant, kind of helping employers see how they would benefit from hiring you.
Right. So helping them kind of connect the dots instead of, having them look for these themselves. You're doing that part of the work for them. Great. Thank you very much, Edward. All right. So now we are on to the QA portion, and I will hand this off to Daniela.
Thanks so much, Paulina, and great work, Edward and Harry. I think that was some really useful tips you were sharing. So if you want to go ahead and turn on your video, I'm going to go through a few questions that we've been receiving from the students, and I have a few questions for you as well, Paulina. So maybe we can start out with you, if that's okay, and then we'll go into some questions for Edward and Harry. So Paulina, one question that I think you kind of touched on, but students were looking for a little bit more detail around, is what does the traditional co-op timeline look like? So what can students who are starting in the fall expect in terms of the timeline?
Great, thank you. Good question. So I would say, in case you want a longer explanation, I actually do talk about this in the Learn video that includes the pre-work. So please check that out. Basically, if you check out the important dates on the U Waterloo website, you can get a feel for what this is going to look like. Basically, each recruitment term, so the term where you're looking for work, is of course the same length as your study term. So it's going to be 4 months long. The first month you will be mainly applying to jobs. So you want to make sure that you have your resume ready to go. Even if you're 8th stream, you're going to get your resume looked at by your TA, your WEAF TA, much like what Edward had to do for part of that job. So please make sure that that's ready to go. And then mostly for that second month, so that would be October if you're 4th stream, that's mainly an interview month. And then after that, the 3rd and 4th month are continuous rounds. So it's all of that kind of mushed together in a much more compressed time where you are applying to jobs and interviewing almost on a daily basis, or having the opportunity to interview on a daily basis. So that's kind of how it works. And again, I know that we have a lot of jargon that we throw at you, and this can be hard to kind of hold in your head. So I encourage you to check out the U Waterloo Important Dates website, and perhaps we can get a link up there if we haven't already. And sorry, important co-op dates, very important. And second of all, if you have questions about this, contact a career advisor through a virtual co-op consult, and you book those through Waterloo Works once you have access to it in the appointments menu.
Wonderful, thanks Paulina. And yeah, we've shared a link there in the chat to that important co-op dates site, so please do check that out. So I want to go over to Edward and Harry for a second. I know you touched on this a little bit, and Edward, you were saying it's really important to sort of cater your resume or highlight things on your resume that are relevant to the jobs that you're applying to. Some of the students were asking, what do you get asked about in the interviews, and what do you think is really important for getting a good co-op job? Do they ask you about your grades? Do they ask you more about personal experiences or projects or professional or volunteer experience? What did you find most commonly asked when you were actually being interviewed, and what is some of the things that you really try to highlight on your resume? Maybe Harry or Edward, we'll start with you.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so the main thing that they ask you is obviously more information about the stuff on your resume. They've read it, but they're curious to see how you explain it and kind of provide more background on exactly what you did. So they'll often ask you, during your role as this, what were you doing? What kind of things were you using with this tool? And sometimes if it's relevant to a job, they'll kind of extend and see, have you ever done this as well, to see if exactly where your experience lies. think the most important thing generally in the interviews is to make sure that you're emphasizing the skills they want, like I said earlier.
Definitely. Thanks. And Harry, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, so you mentioned grades. In my experience, none of the interviewers have ever asked about grades, and they usually just ask about like projects and like work experience and like situations around that. So like they'd be like, and at this job, what did you do? And like, if you didn't know this, what would you have done? Or like, doing this project, this is a team project, right? How did you manage working in a team, stuff like that. It's more like the situational questions and like how you dealt with things and like, and either that or like what type of work you did and what things you used to get that work done and how you would have done it.
Okay. And when you're applying to jobs, is it the same process for applying to all co-op roles through Waterloo Works? Or do some companies sometimes ask for supplementary information, or do you have to maybe do a test or something like that when you're going through the interview process?
Yeah. So yeah, most jobs will just have like you can apply in Waterloo Works, your resume and whatnot. Some will ask for cover letters, some don't require cover letters. And then there's some jobs where they ask you to also apply on their website, and they'll link their website, and then you can go there, apply, submit your resume. And some jobs will also ask you to fill out like a questionnaire or like do a short test, and that's just so they can know like where you're at, and then shorten their like interview process.
Okay, excellent. Edward, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, quickly. Yeah, one other thing I've seen happen, especially for kind of mechanical jobs, is people will ask for a portfolio. So oftentimes you have the option to submit kind of a portfolio of your projects and what you've worked on. That's often a great way of highlighting like easy ways of showing off what you've built and what you've designed, because pictures are worth 1,000 words, obviously.
So true, definitely. I often ask for portfolios as well when I'm interviewing co-op students, so that's a good thing to have prepared. And maybe just on, we had a question specifically about mechatronics. Is it usually a balance of hardware and software jobs, or does it lean more to one side for those mechatronics roles that are posted?
I'd say, well, so first off, the jobs that are posted, you can apply to anything that's within the field, right? So you're not limited to jobs specifically siloed under mechatronics. You can kind of venture out towards more electrical jobs or jobs posted for mechanical students. I'd say it's fairly evened out. Um, People find jobs in a lot of different areas. I'd say software, by virtue of having a lot of jobs available in the field, just tends to get a decent chunk of people hired in that area, but there's still a lot of people who do a lot of mechanical focused jobs like I did, or people who kind of try and focus in on just that hardware or electronics jobs.
Okay, great. And do you find that there's a lot of competition for the roles? Are you and your classmates applying to a lot of the same jobs, and how does that competition work for those roles? Harry, maybe did you want to start us off, and then Edward, you can share what it's been like for you?
Yeah, I guess like there's a whole ton of jobs, so the competition isn't like as bad as you might think. It's like it's all over the world, right? So it just sort of depends on where you're applying. Like I know like in Markham, there's a lot of people that apply in Markham and stuff like that because a lot of Waterloo students are from there. So like those areas might have more competition than if you were applying to say like China or some place like where not a lot of people say might want to go, or maybe. So like because they don't want to travel or like don't want to work like away from their own country. And so that it just depends on like where you're applying. Like some places have more competition than other places. Some companies might also have like more people applying to them. I also find that if there's a cover letter required, less people apply to those. So like if you have the chance, like write the cover letter and apply to those, because I know a lot of people, and that includes me. As a first year, we were like busy and not having time. Like if it says it requires a cover letter, we choose not to apply to those just because we don't have the time, or we choose not to write a cover letter. And so like take the time and apply to those. Those are usually low competition just because a lot of people don't take the time to write the cover letter.
That's a great point, Harry. And maybe Paulina, could you speak a little bit about cover letters and where the students can get some help with those, or if there's reviews done? A few students have been asking about that.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. So I was laughing as Harry was mentioning the cover letter, because indeed, I know students do find it an attractive option to only apply to jobs that don't require a cover letter. Before I get to my cover letter tips, I just want to mention some quick things about cover letters. So yes, as Harry said, I completely encourage you to please apply to those jobs that require a cover letter. But if you're writing a cover letter, make sure that you take the time to tailor it, to make it feel like it's made for that company. Generic cover letters, like the ones that you write once and then never look at for the rest of the term and just send off, that can actually create some kind of negative attention towards your application. So make sure you're not doing that. The other thing that I want to let you know about and kind of warn you about is that Waterloo Works will allow you to submit a blank piece of paper as a cover letter. Please don't do that. It might be able to, allow you to put in your application. However, that short-term fix really isn't worth it in the long term, because if you're an employer and you get a blank cover letter instead of an actual one, you're likely not going to look at that application favorably. So please, I'm letting you know that you could do that, but I'm also letting you know that you probably don't want to. Okay. So anyway, that's my spiel on cover letters. Please take the time to tailor them. So now you're wondering, how can I get the help to tailor the cover letters? One of the best places to go to that I will first recommend is Career Hub. That's careerhub.uwaterloo.ca. I'm not 100% sure that you have access to it yet, but hopefully soon. I think perhaps in August. And anyway, hopefully you'll get that link there. And the other thing, the better, more immediate resource at the moment is that you can actually book an appointment to drop in for 15 minutes to talk to a career leader about your cover letter. So I'm just going to skip ahead to this. I was going to mention it towards the end of the Q&A, but it's a good time to talk about it. So we have virtual drop-in appointments for first-year students. So if you want somebody to talk to about your cover letter or resume or your interview skills, you can book a virtual drop-in appointment with the Center for Career Action through Waterloo Works. So log on to Waterloo Works. On the left-hand side, you'll see appointments, and you can go into drop-ins. And then you can meet with a career leader from 8:30 to 4, Monday to Friday, Eastern Time. So there's also a great resource there.
Great. And Paulina, just to add to that, we did find in one of the last events that the incoming students might not have access to book those just yet. So we were looking into that because the incoming students, it just might not be set up in their Waterloo Works accounts. So don't be alarmed if you see it's not there. It will be added soon. Great. All right. So I'll go back to Edward and Harry. A lot of students have been asking about portfolios. You mentioned maybe sometimes you might get asked for a portfolio. What are some of the things that you've included in your portfolio? And for example, if you have something tangible that you wanted to show, like something you've built, how have you been able to include that, like taking a picture of it, for example, or how do you include things like that in your portfolio? And what does your portfolio look like if you have one? Harry, do we want to start with you?
Yeah, so my portfolio is just like a Word doc with pictures of like projects and stuff that I've done. And then there's like just a couple of texts describing what it is, why I did it, what type of things I've used. Like I designed something and 3D printed it, used AutoCAD and laser cut stuff like that. Yeah, and then as well, like depending on the thing, like some things, like say I built a robot, right? Like it's more useful to see that moving and working, right? So a video would be more useful. So I have like a drive and I have that linked in my portfolio so that people can go there and look at more pictures as well as like videos of things like, say, like a robot project of like the actual robot working. And that's what I've done.
Awesome. That sounds great. And
like usually I also mention that during the interview as well, because some people might not see the link.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I personally have found when I'm doing interviews, it's always helpful if we're in person, if a student brings their tablet or computer and then just pulls it up right there in the interview, because I may be interviewing a lot of co-op students for one role, so it's nice to be able to look at it right there while we're in the interview. And now that we're virtual, I mean, you can share your screen through WebEx or whatever platform you're using and share some of those things as well. So that's always helpful. And Edward, have you ever had to submit a portfolio or any work samples, and what has that looked like for you, or have you not had to do that?
No, I've done so much what Harry said. I have a Word document. I go through and kind of have pictures of everything. Sometimes I do a screenshot of the CAD next to the finished product, and it kind of looks nice to see that comparison. I also kind of add information about what tools I use, just to make it clear that this was done using SolidWorks or I used laser cutting for this one. But yeah, pretty much similar to what Harry said. I know some people who make websites, so if you're inclined to go that route, that's also an option. I personally am not that invested in that portfolio, so I just go with a PDF and attach it to my resume.
Great. No, I think that works too. Just being able to see it as someone who hires and interviews co-op students, just website's great, but just being able to see it in a document is awesome as well. So that's fantastic. Paulina, to go back to you for a second, a few students were asking about how residence works with co-op. And if a student is in residence, do they have to move in and move out every 4 months? If they do move out, do they get to go back to their same room? And obviously it's a bit different this year with COVID and the pandemic. So what does that look like if a student is living in residence first year?
All right, so I would say that for the most up-to-date information, make sure that you're checking again the coronavirus FAQs for the university. In terms of how this happens normally, for example, if you're 4-stream, you would be in residence for those first 4 months, so that first term, the fall 2020, then you would move out for the winter and come back for the spring term. And that would be kind of how that would work for your first year. Of course, being 8-stream, you would be in residence for those first 2 terms, so fall and winter, and then move out for the spring. So that's generally how it goes. Again, I don't know necessarily if there's something new there for this year.
Okay, great. Yeah. And I think we have heard through some of the other Q&As that we've done that it may be an option for students if they do end up having a virtual co-op term, if they want to be in residence starting in September and then stay in residence and work from there. So you have a good Wi-Fi connection, you're on campus still, that may be an option. But as Paulina said, check out that coronavirus website. We'll share the link in the chat to that. The most up-to-date information is there, as well as the residence website has lots of up-to-date info, but it is an option. And maybe Edward and Harry, maybe you could speak a little bit to what you've done in terms of living accommodations, of moving in and out and subletting, and how that kind of works in a normal situation with co-op. Edward, did you want to kick us off?
Sure. So normally what happens is every 4 months you do find a new place to live because you need to find move closer to your job, or you're getting kicked out of your old place. So for myself, I've usually have done a mix of full year leases off campus and also doing 4-month sublets from other people. So because there's a lot of people who do co-op in kind of the major areas around Ontario, so a lot of Waterloo students get hired obviously in Waterloo, but also around Toronto and in Ottawa. There's a couple of spots that have those 4-month leases that line up with our co-op schedule. So they're definitely not impossible to find. You just need to look in the right places, like some of the Facebook groups or some of the forums online.
Great, thanks, Edward. Harry, what's it been like for you?
I've actually been lucky enough to be able to get the 2 jobs, like where I can stay home and then commute, or stay home and work remotely. So I haven't actually experienced having to sublet or find a place for 4 months.
Oh, great. Well, that's an option too, which is awesome. Paulina, to go back to you, some of the students were asking if they wanted to arrange their own job outside of Waterloo Works. How do they know for sure that it can count as a co-op job, and what's the process for that?
Awesome, thank you, great question. So In order for a job to be eligible for an arranged own job or for work term credit, we do have the requirements on the website, and I do know that the link was posted on our chat. And so basically you want to go on there, and there's the 6 basic requirements, and they're pretty straightforward, right? They have to be 12 to 16 weeks in length, be paid at least at least minimum wage, all of those kinds of things, 35 to 40 hours a week. However, due to the interesting times that we're in, that we have, at least for the last couple of terms, and stay posted for the fall term, we do have slightly different requirements for an arranged own job, which we call flexible work terms. So, for example, if you wanted to see what kinds of flexible pathways we have for the fall term, you could check that out on the Co-op Fall 2020 website. We just have a little bit more flexibility in terms of, for example, timelines or the types of jobs that would be approved for co-op work credit. So basically, that's all to say. Please check in with us when you're in your recruiting term to see if there are flexible pathways depending on what is happening in the world, basically. And also, if you have any questions about that, talk to a co-op advisor through a co-op consult through Waterloo Works. We can certainly have the conversation with you and walk through the process with you. But I will let you know that we know that it's a lot of hard work, you arranging your own job. We will work with you and hopefully try to find a way to get that approved for work term credit.
Excellent. Thanks, Paulina. Edward and Harry, can you tell us, going back to your first co-op term, how many jobs did you apply to, and then how many interviews did that actually result in before you were able to successfully be hired for a job, if you can remember?
So when I applied for my jobs in 1B, I remember I maxed out the limit in the main round. I applied for all 50 jobs. I think I got around 3 interviews, and that led to pretty much just 1 job offer. So it definitely spreading a wide net helps.
Awesome. And Harry, was it similar for you?
I might have applied a little bit less during the main round, but I think overall, I think I had at least 100 jobs, like by the end of it. And interview-wise, I think I had maybe 4 or 5 at least, from what I remember. So, yeah.
Great. Yeah, and I think that's pretty consistent across all programs. We've been talking to students from the other programs. So, as Edward was saying, casting a wide net is really important. And then, doing the interviews and kind of thinking outside the box sometimes on some of those is great. Could you speak? Oh, sorry, Paulina, go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry. Just to add to that, casting a wide net in terms of your flexibility, in terms of maybe you find yourself doing a job that you didn't expect to be doing, right? So look at whatever is available, because you can apply to any and all co-op jobs that are out there. Check out what's available. Don't be afraid to try something new. And certainly as well, keeping an open mind in terms of location. Now that remote work is a thing, it can be perhaps a little bit easier to work for a firm in Northern Ontario, for example, that usually has less applications. So just keep an eye on that. Certainly casting the wide net, I certainly appreciate that analogy, because it's true. That's what we see in terms of having success for first work term students.
And I think remembering the cover letter trick, apply to the ones that require a cover letter and write that cover letter is good too. So Edward and Harry, did you find it hard in your first term to balance, being a new university student, applying to jobs, preparing for interviews on top of schoolwork? Was it hard to do that as a new university student?
Yeah, totally. Like I know, like near the main round, like I didn't apply to as much as I should have, and that's the main reason for that is just like the stress of applying a job, like being a 4th stream is like right away, like second week you're in university, like you're already starting to apply for jobs, right? Yeah, that's stressful, right? So like applying, like figuring out like what we're learning, making friends, applying to jobs, living in residence for the first time. Yeah, it's all like kind of overwhelming, but like within a couple, like the first like 2 or 3 weeks, like you get used to it and like you get into a sort of rhythm, and then it becomes a whole lot easier afterwards.
Yeah, no, definitely for me, when I was in 1B, the biggest time sink that co-op involved was going through the hundreds of job postings to find the ones I want to apply for. That takes a lot longer than you would expect, and trying to do it the last minute is definitely not the way to go. So kind of spreading out that work and looking for jobs every few days, possibly for like the whole month while jobs are being posted, and kind of checking up on what new jobs are available is a good idea.
That's great advice. Thank you. And can you speak to maybe any clubs or any like extracurriculars that students can take advantage of and join and get involved with as a first year student? I mean, obviously there's a lot going on when you're first starting university, but there's so many clubs, student design teams, NSTOC, things like that to get involved with. Did you get involved in any of those, or do you recommend getting involved in anything like that to help also bulk up your resume and maybe add some extra experience and things on your resume that might make you even more employable?
Yeah, so design teams are great because they're like literally like related to what you're learning. So especially for mechanicals and like you're building a robot, say if you're in like the robotics team, or you're building a car if you're in like Midnight Sun, right? So that's like directly related to what you're learning, and it's engineering like experience, and it's really great. Like you're able to be hands-on, learn things, talk to like up peer students, and it's great to put on your resume that I helped build this car as part of Midnight Sun, or like I designed this part for the robot. And that's great for your resume as well as your portfolio. I didn't really do as much in my first year, but I started getting in, like joining the student design teams in like the 1B and later terms. And I wish I'd done that sooner, but yeah, it can be hard, like just juggling everything.
Yeah, no, for myself, I got involved with a student design team, rocketry, somewhat early on, and I think that helped a little bit, but definitely there's a lot out there. Try and find ones that interest you, and even if that's not your thing, so maybe student design teams maybe not be for you, aren't for you, that's also fine. I did a lot of time just working on some little side projects I was curious in, so just kind of, making a design out of metal and deciding to learn how to machine it. So making the design in SolidWorks, just going down and learning how to make it on a lathe was something that anyone really could do, and just kind of adds more experience to your own resume and portfolio.
That's an awesome suggestion as well. Thanks, Edward. And could you both speak to what it's like right now with us being online and being virtual? Are you still able to participate in activities like the design teams or any events, virtual things that NSHOC is running? What's that been like for you, and what do you kind of envision that it'll be like in September?
Yeah, so I'm still taking part in like my Awkward Drone meetings. They happen through Hangouts, and yeah, we still able to meet up once a week, talk about things. Instead of drawing things on paper, we would draw on paint and screen share. But yeah, we're still working on things. It's a little different because we're not able to see the actual robot, and like only 1 or 2 people are meeting up to work on that. Um, but yeah, totally. There's like a lot of work being done. We just remote. We use Slack and stuff like that to stay in touch, and I'd expect it to stay the same throughout in the next term.
Yeah, agreeing with everything Harry said, and also kind of from an NSHOC perspective, they're continuing to run a lot of events. To have a lot of things planned for first year starting in the fall. I'm planning an engineering competition for students in the fall, so if you're interested in that, keep an eye for that. I think Elaine is also involved with that, and she's in the chat helping answer questions.
Fantastic. Thanks, Edward. Paulina, just to go back to you for a second, some students were asking about international co-op roles and how they have been affected by the pandemic. And I know you did mention there's a lot of opportunity to still work virtually. Are students able to apply still to international roles, and how does that work currently?
Great question. All right. So this is one of those things that is ever evolving, depending on not just university guidelines, but quite honestly, like federal guidelines that the Canadian government has set out. So as it stands, for example, at this moment, if you were looking for a job in the fall internationally, our first thing would be to say, well, try to work remotely from within Canada. Those opportunities are easily approvable, and those are the ones that we're seeing the most. However, due to certain situations, some students are perhaps out of the country and unable to come back for the fall, or thinking of going back just to be with their families and things like that during this just unprecedented time. And for those circumstances, we do have some exceptions where we can, under certain circumstances, approve work terms. So I wouldn't say it's a blanket, like go ahead and apply to international jobs. It would be more like check out our upcoming, we will have a webpage, I'm sure, kind of explaining what things will look like for the winter term if you're looking for jobs in the winter term. But even if you want to get a snapshot of what is happening right now with the university in terms of international work terms, check out the fall 2020 guidelines. Again, those are moving goalposts because things are changing pretty quickly sometimes, and we just don't want to basically contravene federal guidelines that say that we really shouldn't be traveling anywhere. But certainly there are some exceptions. So please check that out. And in the fall, you will have a lot more information about what the winter term will look like.
Great. And I would also just add, like, as a co-op employer, what we did this term was just made it really clear that it was a virtual role. So the students could work from anywhere, and then we were able to get a lot of great applicants that way because we're not on campus, so we can do it virtually. So, and we did all our interviews through WebEx yesterday, actually, so it was great. Okay, I want to go back to Edward and Harry. We have a few more minutes. Some students have been asking us about hardware and software. So are there any recommendations you have about what kind of a computer a student might need to do a co-op role if it was virtual? And maybe any special software that you've been required to have for some of your co-op roles in the past or present? If that's been a consideration at all, or is it pretty standard and you can kind of get away with, you know, just a normal computer or whatever it is you're using? Did you want to share that? Edward, go ahead.
I'd say just pretty much any computer in the last 5 years would probably be fine. I know a lot of employers are sending out laptops, especially for ones that need that kind of data security and want to be sure that they have control over all the information. So I know friends who are working remotely who had laptops and monitors shipped to them so that they can work from home. Obviously, it's going to depend a lot on the employer. Software, I guess, typical things like Outlook and Office tools are provided through the university, so you can open document files and stuff like that, but anything else probably your employer will arrange.
Awesome, thanks. And Harry, what's it been like for you?
Yeah, like I totally agree with what Edward said, but like to add on, I guess if you're doing like CAD work, SolidWorks is useful. That's free with the Waterloo. So like any decent computer with a decent graphics card can run SolidWorks, so you shouldn't really like think you need to get like a really expensive gaming computer to be able to run it. In most cases, like yeah, if you need some software or like a hardware, they'll help you out and get you the things that you need to be able to do it. So don't really have to worry about like, do I have this software? Like, do I have to buy it to be able to do the job?
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you. And a few other students were asking about LinkedIn profiles. Do you find that you need to have a LinkedIn profile? Do you link to it from your resumes? Or is it not something that you're necessarily doing just yet?
I have one, but I don't really use it very often, and I'm still being able to get a job. So I don't think it's really necessary, but I mean, it's something that you can use to like widen your network, and that's always useful. So if you have it, it's good, but it's not like necessary to have, I'd say.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Edward?
Yeah, similar to that. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's a useful thing. Sometimes employers might glance on it and it's good to have it up, but I think I've used them more for just seeing where my friends have worked, and kind of seeing if there's any where I would be looking to work as well, or if there's anything I want to ask them about if I got an interview for a specific company that I know they've already worked for.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Another student brought that up on one of our other events today, and they said they would look for other U Waterloo students who had done co-ops at the company they were applying to, and they'd even just reach out to them in advance in preparing for the interview to chat with them about what it was like. So it's useful maybe from that perspective. And Paulina, I was gonna say, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm like LinkedIn. Oh, yes, absolutely. It's a useful tool just in general because employers might Google you as well, right? And it's important for you to kind of control what kind of content they see. And LinkedIn is just a great way of directing them to your professional side, what you've done. And of course, as a research tool, it's fantastic. As Daniela, Edward, Harry, you were saying, just like seeing what other people are up to, reaching out to other people. It's a great, great tool for doing research, reaching out to others. And it's a good thing to kind of work on over time because you'll find that once you graduate and things like that, you're looking for a little bit more, your full-time roles, that kind of stuff. LinkedIn can be can be very valuable for finding those jobs that might not always be posted.
Definitely. Yeah, great advice. And we actually have a couple of groups on LinkedIn as well. There's an alumni group for Waterloo Engineering alumni, and students are able to join that to connect with alumni. So it may be a great way to build connections with future employers also. Okay, well, we're almost at the end of our time. We did get a question in about the types of industries that you both have worked in. And I know we went through your co-op roles, but could you maybe just expand on that a little bit for mechatronics and for mechanical? What are the industries that you tend to see the jobs in? They're very diverse fields. So what kind of maybe higher level sort of industry are you seeing posted for the roles that you're applying to?
So speaking from a mechatronics perspective, I've personally been looking at a lot of jobs kind of in mechanical design and product design. So kind of doing CAD work and also conceptualizing, prototyping things. I've seen a lot of job postings available for embedded work with C. So learning to program microcontrollers and doing development work there. I've seen more broadly in terms of industries, I've seen a lot of jobs kind of in automotive and kind of towards that self-driving cars. I've seen a few friends tend towards there working at companies like Uber and so forth.
Awesome. That sounds like a wide variety for sure. And Harry, how about for you? What have you been seeing in mechanical?
Again, a lot of like what Edward said, there's like a lot of automotive, robotics and stuff like that. And then there's also like manufacturing too. Like that's what the company that I worked at, they manufactured parts, and like that also relates like not explicitly like the manufacturing portion, but like behind the scenes and like designing things for that, like making fixtures and stuff like that's mechanical. That's related to like the SolidWorks stuff that you learn in 1A. So
fantastic. Okay, well, I want to turn it back over to Paulina just to wrap things up with a few final thoughts. But thank you so much, Edward and Harry and Paulina. You have been fantastic in responding to all these questions. And thank you so much to our team behind the scenes who's typing responses as well. Hopefully we've been getting through most of the questions and giving you some good information to get you prepared for September.
All right, well, thank you very much. Again, our team behind the scenes, you've been awesome. Daniela, thank you so much for your thoughtful questions. Edward and Harry, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I know the students, the incoming students, we're here really to listen to you. So thank you for sharing with us. As I mentioned, check out Waterloo Works. You may not be able to yet, but hopefully soon you will be able to. And again, just to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. If you take anything away from today, I hope it's the fact that there is a lot of support for you. Yes, there is a lot to get used to as you will be going on, continue or starting your first term as a University of Waterloo engineering student. but know that there is a lot of support, and just reach out. The first year engineering office, certainly your co-op advisors through Waterloo Works. There's lots of resources, the Engineering Society, ENGSOC, so please reach out. We're all here for you. But thank you very much for joining us. We hope you have a fantastic day, and we look forward to hearing more from you in September.